welcome back to the Sweeney Show, Lawyer Up podcast. My name is David Sweeney, and joining me here today is Gary Lee. Gary, you're very welcome.
Thanks, David, and thanks for inviting me on to have a chat. And you're welcome to Ballymun.
Thank you so much.
As are your listeners and watchers and subscribers.
Thank you. Yeah, so you're a solicitor, but you work in the Ballymun Law Centre, and you run that. What exactly is the Ballymun Law Centre?
Yeah, well, we're a community law centre, so we're a not-for-profit charity. We have a board, and we're completely independent of the state and state agencies, and that. And we try and tackle the unmet legal need here in Ballymun. So we're embedded in the community here. You know, Ballymun is by any metric, it's a socio-economically deprived area and has been. And before we came here, we're here 20 years now. But before we came here, there were no solicitors at all in Ballymun, and Ballymun is a core population of about 22 or 23,000. So when you think about that, no solicitor at all for 22 or 23,000, and you go down any rural street in any rural town in the country, and you trip over two or three solicitors on your way down the main street. So that's what we're trying to. We look at tackling the unmet legal needs. So you'd have the legal aid board, the state agency. And they would mainly deal in family law, and they do other areas of law as well, but for various reasons they won't do housing law, for example, or a lot of social welfare law. You won't be represented in quasi-judicial bodies or that.
And who instigated, or how was it set up, and how is it actually funded?
Yeah, so I suppose it would go way back in history, nearly 50 years ago, or about 50 years ago. You had the Northside Community Law Centre set up by Dave Ellis. And that was the first law centre that independent law centres. There's about 10 independent law centres, but only about three community law centres. So Dave and a few others recognised this unmet legal need. Similar law centres exist over in the States, and imported that idea into here. And of course we've FLAC as well, the free legal advice centres. So really it was born out of that, and this, the reality as it was is that there being no solicitors and no access to legal advice in socio-deprived areas. And quite often the people in socio-economically deprived areas are the ones that actually need representation in their interactions with the state, or in their interactions with state agencies. So that's really how it came about.
And what is your history that, because obviously that's, there's a lot of human rights there. You must be driven to help people. There must be some innate, I suppose, a drive in yourself. Like, what's your education? Did you have is your undergraduate in law? How did you end up in the Ballymun Law Centre, and how do you train to actually work in that centre?
Good question. I mean, I probably always had a sense of justice.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really attracted me to the law at the outset. So I did a BCL in UCD, got a great apprenticeship with a firm called J.G. O'Connor and Company in Clare Street, and went on from there. Worked for in several law firms. Had my own practice as well. Went into partnership with Declan Brooks, and we had an office in Dublin, and we had an office in Meath. So that was a great experience. I always had an element of pro bono work. I've always done that, and I had that in my practice. I'm passionate about access to justice. I believe that access to justice is fundamental in a democracy, and unfortunately we don't have access to justice. We have if you can afford to pay for legal services, you're at an advantage over those who can't, and many people can't afford to pay
when
for
you say
legal
access
services.
to justice, because obviously you're not referring to someone that's maybe a defendant in a criminal prosecution. They have access to free legal aid. What's the typical type of person that you're referring to that's not getting access to justice in Ireland?
Well, here we would deal a lot with social welfare matters. We would deal a lot with housing matters. So people and their interactions with local authorities or private landlords or approved housing bodies. Consumer matters as well. But these issues that, on the face of it, look quite small, but mean a lot to people, and are really around basic living and a roof over your head, access to healthcare, access to some money, so you can actually you can actually buy food and put food on the table. So they're not the areas of law really that private solicitors would be involved, because there'd be no money there. There's no fund. If you're challenging a social welfare payment, or if you're taking on a small consumer case, like we had for a while around here. I won't name the internet provider, but there was a large internet provider that seemed to be targeting elderly people with cold calls, and suddenly we had a few elderly people in the area who listened to the radio all the time, didn't know what the internet was, didn't have a computer, and suddenly they were signed up for broadband and TV and a telephone and all this, and they were getting bills in for hundreds, maybe several €100, and that causing them terrible stress, and trying to interact. In fact, one of those people that I acted for, when we did a subject access request, we got 35 hours of taped recordings where he was talking to representatives within this internet service provider. I mean, it couldn't have made money. It couldn't have made economic sense for the internet service provider to be doing that. But it caused him serious problems. Only when we came in, we stepped in, and that was and wrote some pretty strong letters, I can tell you, that stopped and desisted.
Do you then, because obviously I've law practice here, and we predominantly do litigation, medical negligence, and we would have 3 or 4 layers before even a potential client might meet a solicitor. So we probably say no to about 80% of any of the inquiries that come in here, because A, they mightn't have a case, or B, they mightn't be a case that we can take on ourselves, or we will be capable to drive that type of case. But do you have then access to everybody? So does everybody that contact your centre, do they get access to a solicitor?
Yeah, so just for the Ballymun area. So we really just serve the people of Ballymun. Although, having said that, during COVID, we were taking calls from all over the country. We didn't mind. We're very busy. But wouldn't it be great, David, if there was a community law centre everywhere? I mean, if there was one in or several in Cork or Dublin, and one in every major town around the country, and solicitors could then say, rather than say, look, can't take on this case, but it's not going to be profitable, but there's a serious access to justice issue here. We can instead in that saying, well, look, there's a community law centre across the road. They're a charitable organisation. Go over to them, and maybe they can help you out. So we would get referrals in here from solicitors as well, like that. But I'd say there's an unmet legal need.
Is there any crossover then, or what's the I suppose the Free Legal Aid Centre, the FLAC? Is that a similar type of service to yourselves, or you just go another level further in it?
Yeah, so FLAC are absolutely super. They're on a national stage, really, and they have volunteer solicitors and barristers around the country that attend their clinics. I volunteer for FLAC myself, so it's a great organisation, and I would encourage solicitors, practicing solicitors and barristers to allow FLAC to avail of their services. Approach FLAC. FLAC are always looking for volunteers. And then they will take on cases where they think where there might be a wider issue if there's if the common problems are cropping up. They can take on cases and strategic cases. So FLAC are super. They're operating on a national basis. We're sort of embedded here in the community in Ballymun.
I see that you've sat on the Law Society Committee, and you're quite passionate about disability and the rights for people with challenges and disabilities in Irish society. What drives you, or what drove you to get involved in that, and what is the typical type of case that you might see in Ireland today?
Well, I think if you're looking at disability and disability issues, there's been a sort of a view of people with disabilities that somehow a disability is intrinsic to the person, and that because there's something wrong, in inverted commas, with the person, that they can't participate in society and in the community. However, what we would say is that it's actually society that disables people. So, for example, if you can't access a building and you're a wheelchair user, it's not because you're a wheelchair user that you can't access the building, perhaps, but maybe it's because there isn't a ramp up to the building. So it's not because you're using a wheelchair. It's because it's external. It's an external factor, external to you. It's because there's no ramp up to the building.
And I think we spoke briefly earlier about legislation that was trying to be brought in to protect people. Was there some EU legislation, but it took a number of years for actual Ireland to enact it?
Yeah, so there's the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and because it was recognised that internationally that people with disabilities were being deprived of basic rights, so one international treaty was signed up to UN treaty that basically enshrined all those existing rights into one document, and these are basic rights: the right to housing, right to live in the community, right to employment, right to access to justice, and so on, and the right to healthcare, obviously as well. And Ireland signed up to that in 2006. However, it wasn't until 2018 that we actually ratified it as a state. We were the 177th country to do so, and North Korea were the ones that ratified it just before us, and that only happened after pressure was brought by a lot of disability people, activists and disability organisations and people with disabilities themselves. So at the moment in Ireland, you would have the sort of cases that I would have been involved in would be maybe people inappropriately placed in nursing homes. So we have the nursing home support scheme, also known as Fair Deal, which is on a statutory basis, but we don't have personal assistance services. And carers, and that they're not on a statutory basis. So the money will always follow the legislation, rather than non-statutory schemes. So you have people with disabilities then pushed into the older persons category and pushed towards nursing homes, because that's where the money is. And we did a study. I chaired the Disability Federation of Ireland for a number of years, and we did a study teamed up with DCU, and we did a study so there's around about 1,600 people, younger people, inappropriately placed in nursing homes.
Wow.
People that should be out in the community. So I've acted for people who have lived in the community, who have had personal assistance services, and they've got ill, they've got sick, and they've gone to hospital, and then to be discharged back into the community, they might need maybe some additional hours, or their hours might have been lost while they were in hospital. Suddenly they can't go back home again. People that have been living independently at home for maybe 40 years, and they can't go back in. It's very hard when you go out and you talk to people. There was one chap that I acted for, and he was in a community hospital for 2.5 years, and there were people coming in and out of the ward, elderly people coming in and out of the ward, dying, in the room alongside him on a frequent basis, and so we looked at we went and threatened judicial review in relation to that. So a lot of times, once they receive that initial correspondence from us, there will be an engagement with the HSE, and we can, and sometimes we can do something for people. Sorry,
no,
David.
sorry, Gary. I was going to say, like, the type of work you're involved, you're obviously dealing with very specific and personal issues, and it's quite subjective. Do you find yourself, or how do you leave the job? Because obviously, if you're dealing with somebody and it's, they're very emotional, there might be emotional circumstance for them. Like, do you find that do you take your work home with you? Does it let you consume you? And because you're such, you're an activist, you're consumed by the work, or what's the flip side of that? What do you do to relax or to de-stress, or is it or do you enjoy your job and it's not stressful, or do you find it is a stressful job?
Well, first of all, I'm passionate about my job, and I'm passionate about human rights. And I believe in calling out injustice where it's there. So the job that I have drives me, and the people that are treated really badly and often by the state are the ones that I serve on our law centre serves here. But to switch off, I love running. Okay. I live in County Meath. We've lovely places to run. I run on the roads, and I find me out there. Most days I'd be out running, and there's nothing better than to start your day with a 12 or 13 kilometer run, and that'll set you up, or in the evening time. Yeah. So get out there onto the roads and run. That's my way of relaxing.
Yeah, I think sport for a lot of people is that release. Gary, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and talk to you, hear your fascinating job day to day. You're such a champion for people. I've obviously watched you online and seen your your activism and the way you champion people with disabilities and mental health issues and human rights in your own locality and the Ballymun Law Centre. So look, thank you so much, and sincerely wish you all the very best for the future.
Thanks very much, David. And if I could just say, just in terms of our own profession, I think we play obviously a central role in terms of access to justice, and you can reach out. You can volunteer for the likes of FLAC as well, and there are a lot of things that we as solicitors can do. A lot of charities are looking for people with legal experience to come onto their boards as well. So I would recommend and urge people to go on to Board Match and offer their services there. There's a lot that we can do as lawyers. We're very, very well placed to help and assist people, and we do it all the time. And a lot of us, I don't even think recognize that in ourselves as well. So just finish on that note. And thanks very much, David, for having me.
No, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, Gary. Take care. Thank you.